The invitation had been written in gold ink on a ceremonial data card. That was how the Union did things. Gold ink, formal language, a tradition older than most star systems on the membership list. The card had been delivered to Earth's diplomatic office 7 weeks ago. It said, in very polite and very clear terms, that humanity was welcome to send a small vessel, Shuttle class, no larger, to the Grand Assembly Station as a symbolic gesture of goodwill. A tradition for new and developing worlds. A way of saying, we see you, little species. Come sit near the back. Watch how things work. Nobody on the Union Council thought much about the reply Earth sent. It was short. It said, "We will send what the moment requires." The Council noted it, filed it, and moved on. Liaison Officer Riva had been assigned to the human greeting detail because nobody else wanted the job. Humans were a minor entry on the Union's long list of developing species. They had not yet developed reliable FTL. They had no seat on any council. Their world was a single planet, loud, messy, and full of creatures that seemed to argue with each other constantly for reasons nobody could fully translate. She stood in the docking observation bay and watched the arrival screen. The Grand Assembly Station was enormous, a structure built over 3 centuries, wide enough to hold a small moon inside its outer ring. It had received 10,000 delegations. She had handled 43 herself. A shuttle from Earth would make 44. She expected it to take about 6 minutes to process and about 6 days to forget. The long-range sensor board blinked. She looked at it. The system was tracking something coming in from the outer edge of the system. It had just dropped out of FTL, which was odd, because Earth did not have reliable FTL. The file said so clearly. The contact marker sat on the screen, and the classification system ran its automatic check. It ran again. Then it flagged a category it almost never used. Riva leaned closer. The screen read, "Unclassified contact, mass EXCDS known shuttle PARAMETRS, RECALCULATING." She tapped the senior sensor officer on the shoulder. He looked at the screen and stopped talking mid-sentence to someone else. The recalculation finished. The screen updated to a single blinking word, Dreadnought. For a moment, neither of them said anything. Then the officer pulled up the contact on the visual array, and the image resolved slowly, a dark shape moving through the star field, still distant but already filling a larger portion of the display than anything had a right to fill at that range. It was long. It was wide. It moved with a kind of slow, heavy certainty that made the room feel quieter just watching it. Riva opened the emergency channel to the assembly floor. Inside the main chamber, Speaker Bale was mid-address when his aide touched his arm and showed him a data pad. He read it once. Then he read it again. Then he looked up at the visual feed that had just appeared on the chamber's main display, a live image of the incoming contact, still 200,000 kilometers out, and already the most visually dominant object in the system apart from the star itself. The chamber, which had been full of the normal hum of 40 species talking over each other in 17 languages, went quiet. On the visual feed, the ship was becoming clearer. It was dark-hulled, with a color that seemed to pull light in rather than reflect it. Its shape was not elegant in the way Union warships were elegant. It did not have the long, smooth lines of Velari cruisers or the swept geometry of Breathian destroyers. It was built like something that expected to be hit and did not plan to move out of the way. Thick, layered, purposeful. Along its hull, markings were becoming visible, a designation number, a name. UES-IRONHOLD. Bale's aide quietly checked the classification database for anything matching the vessel type. The system returned a blank. Then it returned a note from Earth's own file, Vessel Class Titan. Status, first of class. Purpose listed simply as full spectrum. Nobody in the assembly knew what full spectrum meant. It was not a Union category. Riva was still standing in the observation bay when the Ironhold finished its approach and came to a full stop relative to the station. It did not request a docking arm. It did not need one. It was far too large for any docking arm the station had. It simply stopped, at a distance that was respectful but impossible to ignore, and opened a communication channel. The voice that came through was calm. A woman, no ceremony in her tone, no nervousness, no performance. Grand Assembly Station, this is Ambassador Sara aboard the UES Ironhold, representing the United Earth Government. We have arrived as requested. Please advise on preferred communication protocol, and we will proceed accordingly. Riva looked at the ship on the display. Then she looked at the original invitation on her data pad, the one that had specified Shuttle class, the one that had been written in gold ink. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Then she pressed the response key and said, with remarkable steadiness given the circumstances, UES Ironhold, this is Grand Assembly Station. We receive you. Please stand by. She released the key. Behind her, the senior sensor officer was already pulling up every scanner the station had, pointing all of them at the same object. Somewhere deeper in the station, in rooms full of generals and analysts and very old diplomats, people were starting to ask the same question in 20 different languages. What exactly had Earth been building? And for how long? The docking request came through 3 hours after the Ironhold arrived. Not a docking, a transfer. A single shuttle, small and unmarked, crossing from the human ship to the station's secondary bay. Ambassador Sara and a small delegation, requesting permission to board. Bale gave permission immediately. He wanted to see a human face. He wanted to understand what kind of people sent a vessel like that in response to a ceremonial invitation. Riva was assigned to meet them. She had handled alien delegations her entire career, species with 6 limbs, species that communicated through color changes in their skin, species that breathed gases that would corrode station walls and had to travel in sealed suits. She was not easily surprised. The humans surprised her. They came off the shuttle in plain uniforms, dark fabric, minimal markings, nothing decorative. Ambassador Sara was a small woman with gray starting at her temples and the kind of stillness in her face that made it hard to know what she was thinking. The man beside her, Captain Dario Shen, was taller, with an easy way of moving that did not match the size of the ship he had come from. No ceremony, no speeches in the bay. Sara extended her hand toward Riva, palm flat, in the greeting gesture that the Union had provided in the diplomatic briefing packet sent to Earth 2 years ago. She had actually read it. Liaison Riva, Sara said, thank you for receiving us. We know the ship was not what you expected. Riva shook the offered hand and said, very carefully, it was not. Sara smiled. It was not an apologetic smile. We can explain, but first we would like to see Speaker Bale. The meeting with Bale came later. Before that, Riva had one task: escort the delegation through the station to their temporary quarters, a standard 15-minute walk through the outer corridor ring. Dario walked beside her. He looked at everything: the architecture, the species passing in the corridors, the way the station's gravity modulation shifted slightly between sections. Not the nervous looking around of someone overwhelmed. The calm, nodding attention of someone cataloging. She asked him, because she could not help it, how long Earth had been building ships like the Ironhold. He was quiet for a moment, not uncomfortable quiet, thinking quiet. We started the program 18 years ago, he said. Ironhold is the first completed hull. She took 9 years to build. 9 years, Riva said. We work fast when we have a reason. She wanted to ask what the reason was. She filed it away instead and kept walking. The meeting with Bale lasted 2 hours. Sara was polite, precise, and gave nothing away that she did not intend to give. She confirmed that the Ironhold was a warship. She confirmed that Earth had others in various stages of construction. She did not say how many. She said that humanity had come to the assembly in good faith, that the Ironhold was present as a show of capability rather than threat, and that Earth was ready to discuss any terms of partnership that the Union wished to propose. Bale asked, with the careful diplomacy of a man trying to hide how unsettled he was, whether Earth intended to request military authority within the Union framework. Sora said no. Earth intended to be useful. After the meeting, Riva found herself standing outside the assembly chamber with Dario, waiting for the diplomatic aide to return with a schedule confirmation. She had a question she had been holding since the docking bay, and the waiting gave her nowhere to put it except out loud. She said the ship is a show of capability, Riva said. What exactly is its capability? Dario considered her for a moment, then he said, would you like to see it? The transfer shuttle made the crossing in 11 minutes. Riva spent most of that time watching the Ironhold grow in the viewport, a process that did not stop feeling strange, because the ship kept getting larger well past the point where she expected it to stop. The interior was different from every warship she had ever seen. Union warships were built for efficiency, narrow corridors, low ceilings, everything packed tight. The Ironhold had wide corridors. The ceiling above the main crew deck was high enough that two Velari in full height would not have touched it. The walls were lined with conduit and panel work, but neatly organized like something built to last, not built to impress. The weapons deck was the moment her assumption stopped functioning. The Union's best ship-to-ship weapons were plasma lance systems. Effective, reliable, standard across the fleet for 60 years. She knew their output numbers by heart. The Ironhold's main battery was not a plasma lance system. She did not have a name for what it was. The barrels were longer than some ships she had served on. The loading mechanism was fully automated and, according to Dario, could cycle in 1.4 seconds. The targeting system ran on hardware she could not identify. What does it fire? She asked. Kinetic penetrators, Dario said. Dense core, magnetic acceleration. At full power, one round will pass through the hull of any currently classified warship as if the hull is not there. She stood there, looking at the gun. All of them, she asked, meaning all currently classified warships. All of them, he said, no pride in it, just the answer. She sent the message to Bale that evening, from her private terminal, with her personal encryption. Speaker, we made a mistake in how we measured these people. I am not certain yet how large a mistake. I will report more when I know more. But I want you to hear it from me first, directly. They did not come here to ask for a seat at the table. I think they came here because they already know what is sitting at the other end of it. The Union's military analysis office worked through the night. They used every scanner the station had. They pulled spectral readings, mass displacement data, energy signature logs, and cross-referenced the results against 60 years of warship classification records. They ran the numbers 4 times because the first 3 results felt wrong. The 4th result felt worse. The lead analyst, a Velari named Sas, had spent 30 years assessing military hardware across the Union's member species. He had reviewed the files on Breathian fortress ships, Keth siege platforms, and the famous Danari carrier wings that had ended the border conflicts 2 decades back. He was not a man who reached for dramatic language. He walked into Bale's private chamber at the 6th hour of the night cycle and placed a single data pad on the table. Bale read it. He read it again. He set it down. Read it aloud, Bale said. At the next full session, all of it. Sas did, the following morning, in front of every representative the assembly had. The Ironhold's hull material had no Union equivalent. The outer armor layer was a composite that absorbed directed energy, plasma, particle beam, focused radiation, at an efficiency that should not have been physically possible with the mass ratios the ship was showing. The inner hull was a separate structure entirely, isolated by a gap layer that functioned as a secondary shield system. To destroy the Ironhold's core, An attacker would first have to defeat the outer armor, then the gap system, then the inner hull. Each layer would require a level of firepower that, individually, exceeded what most Union fleets could concentrate in a single engagement. Then Sas read the weapon's output numbers. The chamber was already quiet. It became a different kind of quiet, the kind that happens when a room full of people all stop breathing at slightly different times. The Ironhold's primary battery could deliver a single-shot impact force greater than the combined broadside of 12 Union capital ships. It carried 48 primary battery emplacements. It also carried secondary batteries, point defense grids, close-range energy weapons, a full complement of strike craft, and this was the part that produced a long silence of its own orbital bombardment systems that Sas described, with visible reluctance, as capable of restructuring a continental shelf. To summarize, Sas said, putting the data pad down, the UES Ironhold outguns the Union's combined defensive fleet by a factor of approximately 3. It is, to the best of our current analysis, the most powerful single warship ever documented in known space. Nobody spoke for a while. Then a Breathian delegate raised a hand and asked whether humans had more of them. Sas said that according to Ambassador Sora's statement, yes, others were under construction, numbers unconfirmed. The Breathian delegate put his hand back down and said nothing further. Far outside Union space, in a command ship sitting at the edge of the Vrethian Dominion staging zone, General Treth received the same analysis report through his intelligence network. He read it standing up, which was unusual for him. He was a careful man, patient. He had spent 12 years building the Dominion's war fleet to a point where the Union's defenses were a problem he considered already solved. He called an emergency session with his senior commanders. The room was tense. The numbers had been shared before the meeting started. Nobody had good questions yet. Treth stood at the head of the table and said, "Our invasion window was 8 months. That window may no longer exist. One human ship changes the calculation at the border. If there are more behind it, the calculation does not just change, it ends." One of his commanders pointed out that it was one ship. One ship, however large, had limits. It could only be in one place. Treth was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "These are humans. One ship is what they showed us. What they did not show us is what concerns me." Back in the assembly, Bale called for a short recess and sent for Sora. They met in a side room, just the two of them and Riva as translator, though Sora's language chip handled the Union standard well enough that Riva was mostly present as a witness. Bale asked, plainly and without ceremony, why a species with no council seat and no formal military treaty had built this. Sora set her hands flat on the table. She did not look away. "Speaker Bale," she said, "humanity has been watching your borders for a long time, not because we were invited to, because we have good sensors and we know how to read what we see. 12 years ago, we identified a pattern in the Vrethian Dominion's industrial output, shipyards running beyond peacetime capacity, resource convoys moving toward staging systems, fleet movements that did not match any defensive posture." She paused. "We brought our concerns to the Union through 3 separate back channels over the following 4 years. We received polite responses. No action was taken." Bale said nothing. "So we built the Ironhold," Sora said, "and the ships behind her, because we decided that if something was coming, we were not going to be the species that watched it arrive." Riva looked at Bale. The speaker was old even by Velari standards, and she had seen him navigate crises that had ended governments and redrawn borders. She had never seen him look the way he looked in that moment. Like a man realizing that someone had been standing watch on a wall he did not know existed. "How long have you known?" he asked. "About the Dominion," Sora said. 12 years, about what they are planning specifically." She glanced at Riva, then back at Bale. "We will need a secure room," she said, "and your full counsel. What we have to show you is not a short conversation." The secure room was 3 levels below the main assembly floor, behind 2 separate biometric checkpoints, and a door that Riva had only ever seen open twice in her career. Bale brought his full inner council, 7 representatives from the Union's oldest member species, people who had collectively served over 400 years in galactic governance. Sara brought Dario and one other, a quiet man named Holt, introduced only as an intelligence officer, who carried a sealed case and spoke almost not at all. What Holt placed on the table, when the case opened, was 12 years of humanity's work. It was not a single report. It was a living archive, cross-referenced, updated in real time through the Ironhold's long-range systems, and built on a surveillance network that humanity had apparently been running in silence since before anyone at the table had thought to consider Earth a species worth monitoring. The data was precise, not the kind of precise that came from one good source, the kind that came from many sources over many years, checked against each other until the picture became impossible to argue with. The Vrethian Dominion had 340 warships staged in 3 systems along the Union's spinward border. They had prepositioned fuel and munitions caches at 6 points along what Holt quietly identified as the likely invasion corridor. Their troop transports, 80 of them, fully loaded, were sitting in a holding pattern that had not changed in 4 months, waiting. The projected invasion window, based on supply burn rates and crew rotation schedules, was 8 months. Bale's council sat with the data for a long time. There were questions, good, sharp questions from people who had spent their lives in rooms like this. Holt answered each one without hesitation and without drama, pulling supporting data each time as if he had anticipated exactly that question. One council member, a Breathian named Vor who had overseen Union military affairs for 20 years, asked why the surveillance network had not been detected. The Union ran its own border monitoring systems. How had humans placed sensors deep enough to gather this level of detail without anyone noticing? Holt looked at Vor for a moment, then he said, "Your monitoring systems watch for ships, ours are smaller." Vor asked how much smaller. Holt said, "Small enough that your systems classify them as debris." Vor was quiet after that. Riva had been sitting near the wall, taking notes, not part of the conversation, her standard role in council meetings. But she found herself watching Sara throughout the briefing. The ambassador did not perform urgency. She did not raise her voice or use language designed to frighten. She laid the information down the way someone lays stones into a foundation, one at a time, each one solid, the shape of the whole becoming clear only when enough of them were in place. After the formal briefing ended and the council moved into private discussion, Dario came to stand near Riva. He did what he always seemed to do in unfamiliar spaces, looked at everything with that calm, nodding attention. She asked him the question she had been building toward since the observation bay. Is humanity afraid of anything? He did not answer quickly. She had learned by now that this was normal, that humans process the question rather than reaching for the nearest comfortable answer. "Yes," he said after a moment, "we are afraid of being too late." She waited. "It is a particular kind of fear," he said, "not fear of losing a fight. We can lose a fight and rebuild. What we cannot rebuild is what we failed to protect. A world that burned because we arrived after the fire started. A species that was gone before we knew they needed help." He paused. "That is the thing humans cannot tolerate, not defeat. Lateness." Riva thought about that. About the surveillance network built over 12 years and never mentioned. About the ship that had appeared in answer to an invitation for a shuttle. About the simple reply Earth had sent to the gold ink card, "We will send what the moment requires." She said, "You were not planning to tell us any of this, were you? Not unless something moved you to." Dario looked at her. We were going to tell you today regardless. We came here for this. The Ironhold was the way of making sure you listened. It was, she realized, a perfectly human strategy, not a threat, a demonstration. Come in so large that the room goes quiet and then speak into that quiet with something true. The council was still in discussion when the alert came through. It did not come through the normal channels. It came directly to Holt's personal device, from the Ironhold sensor network, forwarded without commentary in the way that communications come when there is no time to add any. Holt read it. He stood up. He walked to Sara and showed her the screen. Sara read it and closed her eyes for exactly 2 seconds. Then she opened them and turned to Bale. "Speaker," she said, "the Dominion fleet has moved. They have crossed into the Marit border system." She set the device on the table so the whole council could see the live positioning data. "That is 3 months ahead of our projected window." The room absorbed that. Vor said, "They know we know." Sara said, "Possibly, or they simply ran out of patience." She looked at Bale. "Either way, it does not change what comes next." Bale asked what came next. Sara nodded toward the outer wall of the station, and through it, toward where the Ironhold was waiting. "We do what we came here to do," she said. Admiral Hera Voss was already on the bridge when the message came through. She had been there for 6 hours, which was not unusual for her. She had read the positioning data, run 3 tactical assessments, and made 1 command decision before Sora's authorization even arrived. The Ironhold was already moving. General Treth had never seen a ship like it in person. He had read the analysis report. He had looked at the scanner images. He had run the numbers himself twice with his own staff, and he had arrived at the same conclusions as the Union analysts, which he had then filed in a drawer and chosen not to fully believe, because fully believing them led somewhere uncomfortable. The Vrethian Dominion fleet came out of FTL at the Marit border in good order. 200 warships, spread across 3 attack wings, moving in the formation that had been drilled for 18 months. The plan was simple, and it had been simple intentionally. Speed, mass, and shock. The Union border station would surrender or be destroyed. The second wave would move up the corridor before the Union fleet could concentrate. Within 4 days, the first Union core systems would be in range. What the formation encountered instead of a border station was a single ship. It sat in the center of the entry corridor directly in the path of the advance. Dark-hulled, very large, not moving. Treth stared at it on the display for a moment before his tactical officer identified it. He had hoped it would not be there. He opened a targeting channel and ordered the fleet to concentrate fire on the contact. If the numbers were wrong, if the analysis had overstated its capability, they would know within the first minute. If the numbers were right, he would adjust. The fleet opened fire. What happened next took 11 seconds. The Ironhold's point defense grid activated. It was not a system Treth had seen before, and did not match anything in the Dominion's threat database. It was a layered web of close-range emitters that tracked incoming fire not as single targets, but as patterns, anticipating spread, calculating intercept points faster than anything organic could think. The first concentrated volley from 200 warships hit the defense grid, and most of it did not reach the hull. What reached the hull left no visible mark. Then the Ironhold moved forward. This was the part that Treth would remember longest. Not the weapons, the movement, because large ships do not move forward into a fleet of 200 enemies. They hold position, or they retreat and find range. The Ironhold moved forward with the slow, deliberate pace of something that had calculated the situation and found it acceptable. The primary battery opened up. The first round hit a Dominion heavy cruiser at the center of the lead wing. The cruiser was one of the Dominion's best, thick-hulled, well-shielded, built to take punishment. The round passed through it as if the hull were paper and continued for another 11 kilometers before its energy was spent. The cruiser broke in 2. It had taken 1.4 seconds from the moment the battery cycled. The second round hit a destroyer. The third hit a fleet tender that had no business being in the forward line, and the explosion it caused damaged 3 adjacent ships. The Ironhold was not firing at maximum rate. It was firing with careful selection, targeting ships that would cause cascading problems when they went down. Fleet command ships, ammunition tenders, the 2 mobile repair platforms that the second wave would have depended on. Treth watched his tactical display change shape in real time. The second attack wing tried to split and flank. The Ironhold's drone complement launched, 80 strike craft, small and fast, moving in coordinated groups that cut across the flanking routes with a precision that was unsettling to watch. Not swarming, working, like something with a shared mind. Closing off exits one by one. The third wing tried to pull back and regroup. The Ironhold's secondary battery reached them at a range that, according to Treth's own weapons tables, should not have been possible. The battle feed that Riva was watching from the Grand Assembly Chamber did not have sound. It did not need any. The visual data alone was enough to hold the room completely still. She had served on a Union patrol vessel for 2 years early in her career. She knew what fleet engagements looked like. She knew the geometry of them, the careful maneuvering, the concentration of fire, the long exchanges where both sides probed for weakness. What she was watching did not look like that. It looked like one side was a fleet and the other side was a fact. Around her, representatives who had dismissed humanity 2 days ago were not speaking. Some of them were not blinking. 40 minutes into the engagement, with 40% of his fleet destroyed or disabled, and no weapon system that had demonstrated any ability to penetrate the Ironhold's armor, Treth opened a direct channel. He requested terms for withdrawal. The response came from Admiral Hera Voss. Riva heard it played on the assembly feed, a voice that was not cold, not angry, not triumphant, simply even, the kind of voice that had already decided how the conversation would end before it started. General Treth, you had that option 8 months ago when we first identified your staging movements. The offer existed. You did not take it. What is available to you now is a ceasefire and a full withdrawal to Dominion space, contingent on a complete fleet manifest and an agreement to Union-monitored demilitarization of your border systems. These terms will not improve with time. There was a pause. Treth accepted. The Dominion fleet began to withdraw. The Ironhold stopped firing and held its position, not pursuing, not pressing, simply watching until the last Dominion ship was back across the border. Holt, standing beside Riva in the observation room, watched the last contact marker drop off the display. He said nothing for a moment. Then he said quietly, to no one in particular, she calculated the withdrawal offer into the targeting sequence. She left their command ships functional, on purpose. Riva looked at him. Why? Because you need someone able to give the order to stand down, he said. You destroy the command ships, you get a rout. A rout is harder to stop than a retreat. She thought about that for a long time. 3 days after the Ironhold returned to the station, the Grand Assembly reconvened in full session. The chamber held more species than it had at any point in the previous decade. Representatives who had been in transit when the crisis broke had rerouted to be present, and several observer species who had no formal seats sent delegations anyway, because word had spread in the way that large things spread, fast and wide, and impossible to stop once started. Bale opened the session standing, which was unusual. He usually addressed the chamber from his seat. He spoke for a while about history, about the Union, how it was built, what it was for, and what it had sometimes failed to be. He spoke about assumptions and about the particular danger of assuming that a species was smaller than it was simply because it had not yet announced itself. He spoke about what the Ironhold had done at Marit, and about what it had not done, the ships left functional, the withdrawal allowed, the border not crossed. Then he said, The Union will be voting today on full senior council membership for the United Earth government. The motion is not symbolic and it is not conditional. I am asking this chamber to recognize humanity as a full partner in everything that word means, including the uncomfortable parts. The vote was unanimous, every species, every seat. Sora received the news in the Ironhold's small conference room, where she had been reviewing the Dominion ceasefire terms with Dario and two of Holt's staff. She read the result on her data pad, set it down, and went back to the ceasefire document. Dario watched her do this. "That's it," he said. "What would you like me to do?" she said. "Most people would take a moment." She looked up at him. "We came here to be useful. Being useful is the moment." But there was something in her expression, not quite a smile, not quite not one. Riva found her later on the observation deck. The Ironhold was visible through the outer viewport, still holding its position near the station. In the light of the system star, it looked different from when it had first arrived, less like a threat and more like what it was. A thing built by people who had decided, a long time ago, that they would rather be ready than surprised. Sora was looking at it when Riva arrived. She did not turn right away. Riva stood beside her and looked at it too. "I want to ask you something," Riva said, "and I would like a real answer, not a diplomatic one." Sora said, "I will try. You came here with the most powerful warship in known space. You could have walked into that chamber and asked for anything. A seat at the top, military authority over the whole Union fleet, trade rights that would have made Earth wealthy for 100 years. You could have asked, and we would have had very little standing to refuse." Sora did not say anything yet. "You asked for nothing," Riva said. "You offered everything. Why?" Sora was quiet for a moment. "Because power that introduces itself with a list of demands is just a larger version of the thing it claims to oppose," she said. "We did not build the Ironhold to run the Union. We built it because something was coming that the Union could not stop alone, and we were not willing to watch that happen." She paused. "We wanted to be trusted. You cannot ask for trust. You can only do the thing that makes it possible." Riva looked at the ship. "You wanted to be judged as people first," she said, echoing something Dario had said to her the day before. "Yes," Sora said. "A ship that size walks in the door before you do. We knew that. We accepted it, but we still wanted whoever was in the room to see us, not just the ship." The departure happened the following morning. The Ironhold's transfer shuttle brought Sora and her delegation back to the ship in good order, with the kind of quiet efficiency that had characterized everything the humans did. No ceremony requested. A simple channel confirmation, a flight path filed with the station's traffic system, and a brief final message from Sora to Bale that thanked him for his time and left an open channel for further discussion at his convenience. The docking arm that had never been able to reach the Ironhold's hull now had nothing to pull away from. Riva went to the outer observation deck, the long one that ran the full circumference of the station's upper ring. She had gone there 100 times in her career. It was where she went when she needed to think. She was not the only one there. She did not count, but she thought there were representatives from perhaps 30 species lining the viewport. No one had organized it. No announcement had been made. They had simply come, the way people come to stand on a shore when something worth watching is moving across the water. The Ironhold undocked, which was to say, it simply moved, because it had never been connected to anything. It drew back from the station slowly, turning toward open space, its dark hull catching the star's light along its long forward edge. For a moment the shape of it was entirely clear against the dark. Every line, every armored section, the long run of the primary battery housings, the faint light of the drone bay indicators. Then it accelerated. It moved toward the FTL threshold with the same measured pace it had brought to everything, not rushing, not performing, just going. The flash of its jump drive lit the viewport for 1 second, bright and clean, and then there was only the star field where it had been. The observation deck was quiet for a while. Nobody moved to leave right away. Riva did not move. She stood there looking at the space where the iron hold had been, thinking about a gold ink invitation and a very short reply, and about 12 years of quiet watching, and about a species that had decided the best thing they could do for a galaxy that had not yet noticed them was to be ready for what the galaxy had not yet noticed either. Somewhere in the Assembly's administrative archive, a clerk had already updated the original record. The line that once read Shuttle-class vessel had been removed. In its place, 3 words had been entered, plain and unformatted in the database's standard font. As they wish.